Well, it's another day at GSC, and there was a question asked recently of how do you deal with a barn find? Well, Dad and I are going to talk about how to deal with a barn find, especially a 47 to 54 Chevrolet pickup truck. So you bought a 47 to 55 first series Chevrolet truck, maybe from Kansas like I did. Could be a barn find, could be Grandma and Grandpa's. Passenger side of the truck, gas tank is in the cab. Find your battery. Your battery is under this neat little trap door in the floor. GMCs are a little bit different than Chevrolets. Chevrolets, negative ground, standard positive goes to the starter. GMC is the opposite. Your positive becomes the ground and negative goes to the starter. So it's a different polarity. Get yourself, if you're gonna do 12 volt, go find your local AutoZone and get a 26R-DL 12 volt battery. It's like a 625 drinking amp battery, and that is more than enough to turn one of these over. Once you got your battery in, get down to your starter. Make sure that your wires are in good shape. Go to Tractor Supply and buy a new ground cable, and buy a cable that can go off your positive to the starter. Next thing to check is your plus side here. It's your key on power. Goes back into the cab, and it also goes to the coil. If you go to a 12 volt battery, you need a 12 volt coil. Do not use a 6 volt coil with a 12 volt battery. It's not a good thing.
You will let the smoke out.
You'll let the smoke out. Dad's right. It will be a dirty, stinky mess. So the next thing you need is go get your local auto parts store. A tune-up's gonna cost you about 175 bucks. It's more than it should probably ought to be, but stuff's old, harder to get parts. Get all new wires on it, get new plugs in it, and the other thing, points. These are your points here. They open and close, which actually send your spark up your wires to your plugs. This is called a condenser, the little round barrel looking guy here. This is your rotor, and this is the distributor cap. A full tune-up will consist of a cap, rotor, plugs, wires, do a coil, and you'll be set. So, distributor cap is simple. It pops on and off. There are little clip tabs here on the sides. Pop one, push them down, pop the other. Hard to do with one hand. So there's your distributor side. Once you have all that on, the next part's going to be checking spark. We're actually putting a belt on.
You talked about, for the polarity, your negative to your distributor if you're negative ground, positive to your distributor if you're positive ground. Make sure you have that right, or you will burn those points out. They're not that hard to change, but they're not that fun to change either.
Gapping points is not my favorite hobby. So
take it.
Now you know, if you got a GMC, plus is the minus for your ground, and your coil needs to also be flipped. Chevrolet, plus, minus, GMC, minus, plus, where it actually distributes back to the distributor. So we'll get this buttoned up. We're putting a belt on her, and then we'll talk about popping the valve cover off and showing the valves move. So the valve cover's popped off. On a Chevy, it's just 4 screws. On a 235, 216, they're in the middle. GMCs are either or, depending on if it's a 228, 248, 270, 302. But before you go starting an engine, check and make sure that your valves all move. So if you have a second set of hands that's willing to risk breaking some stuff possibly, you have them hop in the truck with the key in the off position and then hit the starter button.
Ready?
Yep. As you can see, all of our valves are moving. And we are in good shape. We've got oil pumping up, so that tells us we've got positive oil pressure to the top of the engine. All valves are in motion, so we can go ahead and get this valve cover back on now that we know this, and we can test for spark next. Valve cover's back on. So, spark check. Now that everything's open and easy to get to, what you want to do is have somebody power your key on. And what you'll do is reach down here and touch your points. So if you go and turn the key on, Dad.
Ready?
Yep, just turn it on. You
On.
touch the points, you hear that? The zap, and you see the spark. It means we got spark at the points. So that's a good sign. It means we're halfway there. Now what we gotta do is get this distributor cap back on. If I can do it one-handed. Alright, dizzy cap's on. So now what you do is go ahead and take your number 1 plug wire here, pull him off, and if you've got a screwdriver, you can stick it in here and hold it against your internal firewall brace. Or you can just risk it, push the spark plug back on,
Put your tongue on it.
lick it, stick a fork in the socket. It only hurts once. Look at that, we have a screwdriver. So we'll pop this number 1 off, push it in until it seats lightly, and then where I usually hold it is right here.
All right, ready?
Yep.
On. Plug it in.
Yep. We've got spark. Alright. So now what we gotta do is slip our plug wire back out of our contraption here. Stick our plug wire back on. Alright, plug wire's on. Now go and pump the gas, turn the key on, and see if she rips. Take 2, since Dot doesn't want to actually cooperate today, since she's just being a pain. Alright, so we're on Dad's Suburban now.
Which is under construction, destruction,
It's
evaluation, evolution.
half of it's in my garage, the other half of it's here. So you don't know the condition of the gas tanks in these 9 times out of 10. You can go buy yourself a little 2-gallon can and some 5/16 fuel line, run it through the firewall, it comes up. Go get yourself a nice new fuel pump from Napa Auto Parts down at the bottom there. Hook them up and away you go, because there's a good chance the diaphragm inside has been eaten up, chewed up from old gas, and you won't have any fuel pressure. So cheap and easy rubber hose comes up here, gets in place. We already talked about valves moving on the other truck, talked about spark. So at this point we could probably jump to the fun part of actually hearing one run that has sat in a barn for quite some time, if Dad's going to get in the truck anytime
Working on
soon.
it. Please note this engine was sitting outside for a number of years under a tarp, and we brought it home and we set it up on a tire. So you don't even need to have it in a truck to make them run.
You can start these sitting on tires, pallets, trailers, and they'll run on almost water. So for a quick recap, if you buy an AD truck, 47 to 55 first series Chevy GMC, GMC's a reverse polarity, positive ground. So when you put the coil in, the plus side is towards the distributor and the negative side is off the key switch. Check your spark at the distributor, put plugs in, new wires, fuel pump. You can use a 5-gallon gas can to get them started. Check your valves before you get crazy. Do the 12-volt swap to get them running, because the 6-volt will turn very slowly. If they've sat for a number of years, it's nice to have that little bit of extra oomph. The only thing that has to change when you do 12 volts in this instance is remove the wires off the generator and go ahead and basically put in a 12-volt coil. It's not super complicated, and then you can enjoy 6-cylinder sounds just like that. Happy trucking, guys.